Hey everyone, and thanks for jumping back into the cryptoverse. Today, we're going to talk about Bitcoin, a pep talk. If you guys like the content, make sure you subscribe to the channel, give the video a thumbs up, and also check out the Telegram channel, which you can find a link to in the description below. Let's go ahead and jump in. Now, you guys know my thoughts on this. Naturally, I'm a proponent of the idea that the cycle will lengthen and that it's going to take us longer than most people might expect to make it to that market cycle top of over six figures. But I think right now, going through that is probably not going to be as helpful. I mean, we'll do that in a future video. But the first thing I want to say is, welcome to crypto, okay? But also to really tell the new people that if you're feeling kind of down, to put it lightly, right? If you're feeling kind of down, to put it lightly, remember, we've all been there. And if someone comes to you and says something that is maybe not the nicest thing, just remember they were there too at one point. Now, to some degree, I want to show you guys this. To some degree, you've now experienced what some of us experienced back in March. Okay, look at these 2-week candles. Okay, look at these 2-week candles. The 2-week candle back in March of 2020 was a negative 37%. So we dropped 37% over 2 weeks. Here, a 37% drop. 37% drop over 2 weeks. Okay, so welcome to crypto. Is sort of like almost like a rite of passage to go through a major dip. This is certainly a major one, to say the least. We are certainly not necessarily out of the woods yet. We could be. We're not necessarily out of the woods yet. And I want to caution people into thinking that we are. Okay? So I don't really know where the bottom is. I'll be honest with you guys. I don't know. I stick to the risk levels on the premium list. That's what I use to DCA back into the market. I don't really know where the bottom is. But what I can say is that this is the proof, right? It's the proof that institutions are not going to keep Bitcoin from dropping 50%. They're just not. And we've been saying that the idea that institutions will keep Bitcoin from dropping 40%, a lot of people used to say it's never going to drop 20% again, then 30%, then 40%. Look, it still has the ability to drop 55%. So with that said, remember, the people who stick around typically have the most to gain. And when I say that, I don't necessarily mean that we're going to have an immediate recovery back up. Okay, I don't necessarily mean that, because momentum works both ways. I mean, over here things were more likely to go up than down. Now things are probably more likely to go down than up. So momentum works both ways, but at some point, you get that shift in the momentum, right? You get that shift in the momentum. And remember, we always speculated that Bitcoin was in fact ahead of schedule. Based on, a lot of the prior moves, we speculated that it was ahead of schedule. So a pullback could allow a lot of institutions to come into Bitcoin at far more attractive prices than FOMOing in at 64K a month or two ago. And this was my main concern, was that something like this was just not necessarily going to be sustainable. It's all about whether it's sustainable or not. And this is what I was somewhat worried about, was the idea that we were ahead of schedule based on a lot of metrics, and that lengthening cycles still has a really good chance of playing out, even if we did have more intra-cycle volatility than we may have expected. I'll be the first to tell you guys I did not expect a 64K Bitcoin this early in the cycle. It's sort of a reason to constantly challenge what you think is possible by Bitcoin in the short term. But it does not change that I think over the macro scale, even this cycle, I still think we're going to ultimately trend to six figures. Remember, we've shown before the whole double peak idea, the double peak cycle of 2013, and how we've continued to emulate that in this cycle, albeit at a lengthened rate. To have a double peak cycle, you have to have a first peak. To have a double peak cycle, you have to have a first peak. So unlike the 2013 cycle, I would not necessarily assume that we have to go put in a new all-time high in 2 weeks, okay? Everything about it so far has been extended, and I would expect the consolidation phase to be extended as well. So hopefully this video, provides some level of insight into what's going on with Bitcoin. I've decided not to throw all the charts, and throw all the charts up and show that. We'll do that in future videos. But the first thing is to realize, this is par for the course in crypto. The emulation of the 2013 cycle continues. It's just being, significantly extended, and don't necessarily assume that we are going to immediately recover back to 64K in like a few weeks. Because I do see some people assuming that. If it happens, great, right? Great. That's fine with me. If we go back to 64K next week, that's fine with me. I just think it's highly unlikely. I think it's highly unlikely that something like that happens. And I think measuring things by probabilities is probably better than definitively saying something's going to happen or going to not happen. So yeah, we could go to 64K next week, but it's more likely than not that we spend some time down here. Now, with that said, even when the market comes down, you can get periods of relief sometimes. I mean, things in the same way that Bitcoin doesn't necessarily just move straight up. I mean, it goes up and sometimes it comes down, right? In the same way that Bitcoin can do that, when it goes down, it can also do the same thing where it sometimes goes up. So I wouldn't necessarily assume that if it were to do something like this, I wouldn't necessarily assume that we're out of the woods in terms of reaching our final consolidation level, okay? I would not necessarily assume that. I would say you need to manage your risk appropriately, and a lot of times, DCA is your friend depending on what your own risk tolerance is. So we'll do more videos. We'll look at the charts. We'll make comparisons between prior cycles. You guys know we'll continue to do that so we understand where we are in the current cycle. But if you're new and if you're feeling somewhat down, remember the people that bought over here, they were feeling the exact same way. Okay, they were feeling the exact same way. And then now when you look at these peaks, a lot of times it's natural to just measure, well, what was the ROI from the bottom? Okay, and you see that it's that. And so in the future, when we're say out here, I mean, I think we're probably going to peak somewhere way out here. As I've said before, I think that as far as I'm concerned, I think the cycle peak is somewhere between late 2022 to maybe even early 2024 at the latest. But I've often contended that I think the cycle peak's probably going to be sometime in 2023 is what I think, and that it's going to be a long grind to get there. Institutions will slowly come on board, and buying at cheaper prices for them is definitely a good thing. The whole space is being built out. DeFi is not going anywhere. Centralized finance is not going anywhere. NFTs are not going anywhere. There's a whole lot of things that just simply aren't going anywhere, and that's a fundamental reason why I think that this cycle will not see that blow off top at 300K this year, like is projected on some other models. If it happens, great. I'll be a happy man if we go to 300K this year. I just wouldn't necessarily expect it to happen. So in the same way we measure the ROI from the bottom, it's possible that if this is the bottom, that in the future we'll also measure the ROI and say, oh, well, look, you could have done, you could have seen like a 600% move or something if you had just bought here. But I'm telling you guys right now, I don't for a minute necessarily believe that is the bottom. Okay, it could be. It could be. I didn't know that this was the bottom over here. Based on the risk levels back then, it made it seem like it was the bottom. I'll tell you that. Based on the risk levels back then, it made it seem like that was the bottom. I'm not sure about this one. I'm not sure about this one being the bottom. Could be, but it might not be. You don't need a YouTuber to tell you that, right? Anyways, if you guys like the content, make sure you subscribe to the channel, give the video a thumbs up. If you want to know how I'm navigating the market, make sure you check out the premium list. You can find a link to that in the description below. Thank you guys for tuning in. Subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Bye.